The cleric was practically dead when she saw her last, and yet now she smiles. It's tight, exhausted. She looks awful, pale as ash and with dark bruises under her eyes. Her chest is tightly wrapped, and there are tubes coming out of the sides of her, and her hands sit limply on her lap. Yet she watches Jun closely. "When did you get here?" Jun demands, but doesn't wait for an answer. Lise was in the bed before, unconscious but alive. "Where did they take her?" She moves toward the hospital door. The handle won't move. Jun casts on instinct for a lock mechanism and freezes. They've jammed her neural access to the casting net. She's cut off completely. Fear turns to panic, tunneling down her spine. She jerks the handle harder, half convinced she can rip it out of the door. "Hey!" she shouts, hitting the door with an open palm. "Hey! Let me out!" She thought you'd be anxious. They promised her they'd bring her right back. "Why can't I cast? Why is my ocular dead?" "Mine is as well," says the cleric. "I assume it's a security measure." "Why the fuck did they take her while I was asleep?" "She didn't want to wake you." "That's bullshit," Jun snaps. "They must have drugged me. It's been 2 days since we boarded the risen wave," Chono informs her. Jun just stares. "I understand you haven't slept in 3? The body can only take so much, believe me. I'm very aware of that at this moment." Jun hesitates. Her memories of everything that happened after they jumped are fuzzy. She remembers the train car finally reaching the military station and Jeveni warriors flooding the compartment. She remembers cradling Lise against her, feeling the slick of blood all over her, and how their eyes met for just a few seconds before Lise's rolled back. She remembers going with Lise to the Risen Waves hospital and getting shoved in a room to pace and wonder and receive only intermittent updates. There were surgeries and complications, and by the time they took Jun to this room, she half expected to find a corpse waiting. But, unnaturally still though she was, Lise lived. Lise is alive. Jun hasn't left her side since. Where would they have taken her? She asks the cleric as much, and Chono opens her mouth to answer, but coughs. Agony crosses her face. Makes her look both old and young. Jun thinks of her in the landing bay, trying like hell to get that door open before the Cloakson could gun her down. And Jun had helped her. Why had she helped her, exactly? There's a little cup of water on the bedside table. Jun brings it to Chono, tipping it against her lips. Here. Chono drinks, nearly gags, and coughs again. She sips a little more, then drops her head back against the pillows. Her face is sheened with sweat. It glistens on her collarbones and the notch of her throat, giving her a clammy, drowned look, so different from the steely calm Jun first saw on the roof in Sinkai. This close, Jun can see a wealth of injuries. A cut on her throat that has scabbed over, bruising on her knuckles and arms and forehead. Jun can only imagine what she looks like under the bandages, and yet, like Lise, she's alive. It couldn't have been easy. Why would the Jeveni pour resources into a hand of the Kindom after what the Kindom has done? Voice hoarse, Chono tells her. Tests. They took your friend for tests. Jun doesn't really like the vagueness of that, but she also doubts that Chono knows more. And anyway, she's Kindom. Are the Jeveni doctors under some misapprehension that she and Jun are friends or something? Wouldn't Missar have told them the truth? She seemed well, Lise Cognier. Awake, alert. She warned me not to wake you. Jun fights not to show her relief. She's seen Lise injured before, but she has never seen anything like Lise on that train car. Her warm skin leached of color and her lips gone blue, and all of it accented by blood. Blood fresh and wet, and blood crusty and dark. Blood that smeared and congealed, and blood that pooled under them. Truly, says Chono then, and Jun flinches and looks at her, sees a completely baffling gentleness in her expression. She looked well. I think she'll be fine. Jun narrows her eyes. wondering at this kindness, this concern for Jun's feelings. In a flare of accusation, Jun reminds her, "You shot me at the Siltglow Cliffs. You shot me, or one of your novitiates did." Chono, half dead though she looks, seems briefly amused. "Your Lys Konye nearly blew me up. You're lucky. Most of the time she succeeds. You're lucky too. There was a lot of blood on that roof." Jun rotates her shoulder, mottled with half-healed regenerative tissue, and still stiff. "I suppose we were both perfectly happy to kill each other." Chono's reaction is muted, but Jun still catches it. The slightest wavering of her stare, the slightest shift in her chin, signaling a dissent. Jun hesitates, and then a memory floods back. "You called me 6. Chono just looks at her. "Up on that roof. You thought I was 6, and you kept telling your novitiates to fall back. You didn't want them to rush me, to kill me. You thought I was 6. Chono shakes her head a little. "I wondered. I was testing the theory. By then, I more suspected that you were working with them than that you were them." Jun blurts a laugh. Chono blinks, questioning, and Jun laughs again. Actually, she might sound a little frantic. She probably needs more sleep. She wipes a hand down her face. "It's just ironic, isn't it? You thought I was working with 6 when all that time I never was. You were." Cleric Chono's already pale face blanches and she looks away, clearly not finding the humor. For a moment, her eyes move restlessly, and Jun has the sense that she wants to get out of the bed, that she wants to run. Her agitation is so stark that Jun feels guilty for the joke, until it occurs to her that Chono's reaction might be grief. Grief over the death of Esek Nightfoot. And that is something Jun could never understand, never forgive. She hopes the ground is devouring Esek Nightfoot. She welcomes the day when there is nothing left, not even bones. Then Chono asks, "Do you know what happened to them?" Jun hesitates, some vindictive part of her wanting to withhold any information that might be of interest or comfort to Esek Nightfoot's protégé. But in the end, she doesn't have the energy. And after all, this is of interest to them both. "I saw the Givenni drag them off the train car. I told everyone who they were, but no one seemed to believe me. I've only talked to doctors since then, and the doctors won't say shit. Not even if they're alive. But you're alive, so I suppose that's a good sign for them. The Givenni don't strike me as back-alley executioners, even if they do think 6 is Esek." Jun flits her eyes up and down the broken body of the cleric. "Then again, maybe they're just waiting to make a show of it. String you both up and make an example of you." Chono offers no reaction. Vindictively, Jun adds, "It's what the Kindom would do, isn't it?" But this has little effect. Chono nods distractedly, her eyes drifting. She's lost in thought for several seconds. Jun starts to think their conversation is over when, "I killed a man last year," Cleric Chono says, her voice far away, her gaze distant. Jun wasn't expecting this and looks at her warily. "A cleric," she adds. "He was guilty of horrific crimes, but he was also old. I didn't care. I beat him to death." Jun remembers mention of this from her own research into Chono, but didn't know what was true and certainly didn't anticipate this description from the mild cleric. After a moment, Chono looks at Jun again, and even in her state of exhaustion, she seems focused and sharp. "I was there the night Esek attacked your family. Not there when it happened, but afterward. I was her novitiate. I saw what she did." Jun's mouth goes dry. A tremble starts in her hands, imagining the scene that she herself never witnessed. Hoarsely, she says, "I was in the Archivist's Academy at Rinkala. I got a message from my great gra telling me to run, and that was it. I didn't get to say goodbye." Her voice cracks. She clears her throat, hardening. "I didn't get to tell them I loved them. I didn't get to hear them say they loved me ever again. Not one word of love. Just run. Esek took everything else. Chono nods without argument or defense, but then she frowns. He warned you to run? Jun bristles. What? Yes, of course he did. Another nod, a considering look. That was a word of love, wasn't it? Jun just stares at her, unblinking. She can't blink. It's like her face and her lungs and her body are frozen, and that must be why she feels the burn in her eyes, the sudden pressure in the back of her throat. It must be why she cannot look away from the expression on the cleric's face, a gentleness that Jun doesn't want. She doesn't want it. Fuck her, Chono says. What happened was unforgivable. If you're expecting me to defend myself or my part in it, you'll be disappointed. I am a murderer and an enabler and a coward. I am as guilty as any hand in the trouble, even Esek. Some devour me for what I've done. The words unlock Jun's throat. She breathes in harshly, stepping back. So why did Six save you? I think they would have given you every drop of blood they had to save you. Why? Chono doesn't answer at first, and though Jun is at the height of her impatience, she manages not to press her. Then, we've known each other for a very long time. It's an unsatisfying answer. Jun wants to say so, to make demands. But maybe it is also the only answer. It's not as if Jun knows how to explain her own strange association with Six. Once again, she finds herself looking up and down Chono's body, studying her face, trying to see something, and she's not sure what. The person Jun rescued in the landing bay, the person who murdered a corrupt cleric. Challengingly, she says, I researched you, after we met at the cliffs. There's not much, but there are testimonies. Things your parishioners have said about you. Communities you've served across the treble. They all claim to love you. Chono looks instantly uncomfortable, her mouth twitching down in a grimace. Jun narrows her eyes. If you're as bad as any hand, why do the people love you so much? Probably because they don't know any better. Then you have a low opinion of them. Chono tenses, which must hurt, because she grunts and pushes her head back into the pillow, blinking rapidly. This cleric you killed on Pipishap. The records are vague, but was he a rapist? Chono keeps grimacing, and Jun can't help a humorless chuckle. Yes, of course. What a monster you are, for killing a rapist. I don't regret killing him, Chono says through her teeth. So what do you regret? Being a hand, working for Esek? Loving Esek? Yes, Jun snorts. I can't help you with that. They are at a momentary impasse, the cleric staring at her in stark silence, eyes fierce, as if the intensity of her own feelings is too much for her to think of expressing in words. It's a remarkable picture of anger and regret, and, against her better judgment, Jun feels pity. She sucks her teeth, shrugs a shoulder. Make amends, she says. It's almost more order than suggestion. That's your only option, isn't it? Make amends, Burning One. Chono's look says the thing they both know, which is that nothing could ever be enough, that some things are irreparable. There's no salvation, no absolution, and no excuses for not trying anyway. After several moments, the fierceness in the cleric's eyes dissipates, replaced by that quiet weariness again. Her short nod could mean anything, a promise, an acknowledgement, a surrender. But Jun has no opportunity to press the matter further because the door opens. The second she sees Lise sitting up in a hover chair with a nurse behind her, she springs forward. Her heart is in her throat, lungs tight as rocks, her body a torpedo. She brings the chair to a sharp halt. The nurse squawks in surprise and takes Lisa's face in her hands. It's not tender. She holds her face still and looks at her the way she looks at code, scouring for information. There are healing cuts and bruises. There is the feathering of scar tissue along her eyebrow. Her head is shaved, a tragic necessity because one of the cloaks sliced their bloodletter right across her skull, the wound now growing over with regenerative tissue. Jun leans back enough to take in the rest of her, bruised and bandaged, the stump of her arm now fitted with a far less sophisticated prosthetic than the one Lise lost in the battle. Jun grinds her teeth. "Are you all right?" Her voice is raw. Lise smiles tiredly. "I am." Jun glares at the nurse. "Where the fuck did you take her?" The nurse balks. Lise murmurs, "Jun." And when Jun finally looks at her again, she models a deep inhalation. "Breathe." Jun's chin wobbles. Lise inhales again, and Jun tries to copy her, but it's too much. She takes her face in her hands again. She stares directly into her eyes, those eyes like oil slicks, those eyes she loves. "Don't you ever do that again," she whispers. Lisa's good hand rises to cup her elbow. "All right. Do you hear me? Don't you fucking ever..." Now Lisa's hand is on the nape of her neck, pulling her down, pressing Jun's face into her shoulder. Lise smells faintly antiseptic and a little sweaty, and underneath, the barest trace of her familiar green smell. Jun remembers the stench of blood all over her, iron and rust and a gagging sweetness. For a second, she thinks she's going to be sick, until the hand on her neck clasps tighter. And then all she wants is to crawl into her lap, to crawl inside her, to be subsumed. With a helpless squeaking sound, she realizes she's weeping. Fat drops spattering on Lisa's hospital gown, and Lise is murmuring to her, her own voice thick with tears. "I love you. I love you." Now, tisks the nurse. "Let me get her into bed." A gruff voice answers, "Leave them alone." Jun pulls back, embarrassed, wiping at her face. But the sight of Massar stops her short again. He's come in behind the nurse and stands with one arm in a sling against his chest, his left eye covered by a bandage. It's a throwback to when they met, after Captain Foxer had blackened his eye. Then she remembers reuniting with him on the train car, his whole face bloody, his eye torn out by cloaks on shrapnel. "Fuck, Massar," she whispers. His lips twitch, and then he grins. "Now, don't go weeping for me, too. The doctors are already working on a replacement. Once it rewires, I'll hardly be able to tell the difference." This isn't strictly true. Even with the most advanced technology, a prosthetic eye can never quite recreate the original, but she doesn't say so. Still embarrassed to be caught crying, she gestures impatiently at Lise. "So why'd you stick a piece of plastic on her?" Massar's good humor doesn't flag. He chuckles. "They're working on her arm, too. It'll be leagues better than what she had before. I promise you that." Jun nods tersely and looks at Lise again, her ire fading as she murmurs, "Are you in pain?" "A lot less, now," Lise replies, which from her is as good as admitting she was in agony before, and Jun's throat closes with the threat of more tears. Lise suggests, "Why don't we let the nurse get me into bed?" Reluctant, Jun stands back as the hover chair maneuvers past. Jun watches anxiously as the nurse helps Lise back into her bed. At least none of her injuries seem to have stopped her being able to walk, but nonetheless, Jun is ready to step in if needed. Only after the nurse has left and Lise is resting against the pillows, she grabs Jun's hand, a rare sign of vulnerability, does Jun face Massar again. To her surprise, he's looking at Cleric Chono, the two of them watching each other in disquieting silence. "So," Jun feels an awkward impulse to break the stalemate. "You here to tell me why my neural link is shut off?" It works. Blinking his one eye, Massar has the decency to look cowed. "I know that's got a sting for you. It's not forever, but the wheel wants to keep some things close right now, and if we give you back your access, you'll hack through every system we have." That's fair, though it in no way appeases her. She glances toward the door, probably locked again, and wonders how long "it's not forever" means. "Will you at least tell me where we are?"
"We're on the Risen Wave."
"No shit, we're on the Risen Wave, but where is the Risen Wave? Why hasn't the Kindom tracked us down yet? And why have you put a cleric in the same room as us? He opens his mouth, looks momentarily stymied, and shuts it again. We're outside travel space, says Cleric Chono suddenly. Everyone looks at her. Otherwise, the Kindom would have found us. We're in the same room because it is convenient to keep all your unknown variables in one place. Not to mention, I predict the rest of the hospital is full after the battle with the cloaks on. We're prisoners, but not dangerous prisoners, in your estimation. That's why 6 is somewhere else. A real prison, probably. Them you consider dangerous. At first, Basar only looks uncomfortable, but at the end he frowns.
Esek Nightfoot is in our prison.
Chono makes a soft sound, an indrawn breath. So they're alive, she whispers. The sheer intensity of the question takes Misar off guard. His curt nod makes Chono swallow convulsively, her eyes wet with either physical pain or emotion. Jun looks at Lise and sees Lise watching Chono. It's Lise who tells Misar after a tense pause. The person in the prison is not Esek Nightfoot. Misar hesitates, glancing from Chono to Lise.
She's trying to trick us.
Lise shakes her head.
When I found them on the train car, the person who looks like Esek Nightfoot was protecting Jun from Vas Medisogo. And Cleric Chono, dying as she was, tried to help. Your ships would never have escaped if not for that. She was protecting herself, trying to survive.
You are wrong, says Lise. There is so much finality in her voice that Misar closes his mouth. He looks torn, a little grumpy, and then he throws a suspicious glance at Chono.
Well, if you're both that sure about it, I suppose you won't hesitate to help me.
Jun raises an eyebrow, aware of Lisa's fingers gripping hers a little tighter, like she's afraid Misar is going to ask Jun to go on some new caper. Jun rubs her thumb. Help you how?
Help me figure out who she is.
He casts a view into the air. At first, all Jun can feel is bitterness that his link works, but then, drawn as ever to shiny, casty things, she takes in the wall of text and glyphs that has appeared. It's an obvious encryption code, but unlike the Kindom encryption that strangled the name day coin, this is wild-built, with a grammatic structure that's gibberish while still being familiar, a hodgepodge of casting logics. Without her neural link, she can't dive into it, can't unwind it, and she says so. What is it? She adds.
It's the encryption preventing us from accessing Esek Nightfoot's neural link.
He looks at Chono, like he's gearing himself up for an unpleasant task.
Your Kindom. Can you tell us how to get through a Kindom link encryption?
Jun scoffs. That's not a Kindom encryption. He frowns.
What?
That's pure built-in-the-black chaos cipher. Kindom encryptions are much tidier. 6 probably built it themselves. He still looks annoyed at hearing her use the name 6, but asks,
Can you break it?
Jun pauses, glancing at Chono. The cleric looks feverish, eyes red-rimmed and exhausted, her fine black hair lank with sweat. Hacking 6's neural link is a surefire way to prove that 6 is not Esek Nightfoot, and Jun can see how badly Chono wants her to do this. And Jun, of course, has her own motivation for wanting 6 to be safe. Still, Jun's a con artist first. She looks at Misar again. What'll your wheel give me? Misar blinks. Lise chuckles.
Give you?
Misar repeats. Yeah, the way I see it. I've done a lot of favors for you lately, and the most I've gotten out of it is a vague job offer and a few near-death experiences. You're bringing me this encryption because your people can't break it. So if I break it for you, what will you give me? He looks at her for a moment, still clearly startled, and then he blurts a laugh.
You are such an asshole.
I'm pragmatic.
Yeah, whatever. Give me a second.
He turns his back on them, and Jun knows he must be casting a message to someone, maybe the wheel. It's a silent conversation, but he shifts from foot to foot. Jun glances at Lise, who gives her a quick approving wink, and not long after, Misar faces them again.
All right.
He nods his head toward the door.
Someone wants to talk to you. Come with me.
Surprised, Jun hesitates. This is obviously her opportunity to meet another member of the wheel, but she's not keen to be separated from Lise again. Their knit fingers are like vines that have grown together over centuries, and that's how Jun wants it. "We won't be long," Massar promises, noticing her expression. "And Lise will be here when you get back. On Sejevin, I swear it." "It's all right," Lise tells her with a reassuring nod. "Go with him." Finally, reluctantly, she lets go of Lise. She follows Massar to the door, pausing to look back on the room. Lise's and Chono's beds are directly across from each other, and they're looking at each other now, faces expressionless. The traitor cloaks on and the traitor cleric, both as taciturn as ghosts. What interesting conversational partners they will be. Jun points at Lise. "Try not to lose that arm," and steps into the hallway. Jun has only the vaguest memories of the hospital, of being moved from the waiting room to Lisa's room. But now she takes note of the equipment against the walls and the personnel walking briskly about their tasks. She knew the Risen Wave was a functional city, but it hadn't occurred to her that its hospital would be sufficiently modernized to manage the after effects of a battle, or that there would be enough doctors and surgeons among the Juveni to serve those needs. Massar leads her down the hall, past rooms with open doors and people in beds. She sees the signs of injury and recovery, the Juveni fighters and civilians who survived the brutal hand. Jun wonders for the first time how many didn't survive. She thinks of the ship of 500, blown apart in the Black Ocean. She thinks of the crew of the Happy Jaunt, who made their last stand as Niccolo lay dead in the landing bay. Did any of them survive? She asks Massar, and watches the tension gather in his face. He's already walking slowly to accommodate her shorter stride, but the question almost makes him stumble. "No," he says. "The cloaks got on board. They were all killed." Queasiness curls acidic in Jun's stomach. "I'm sorry." He nods, a curt gesture, and the silence makes her think that this is no small matter to him, that the grief of it is a monster in his chest. Jun swallows. "I'm sorry about Niccolo, too. I didn't really get to say it before. I liked him." This time Massar smiles tightly. "Everyone liked him. Some of the wheel are more likable than others. He was... well, we loved him." "Why did he draw on the cloaks on?" "To protect the rest of the wheel." Massar glances at her. "Something you should know about our government. There's no glory in being a spoke of the wheel. No self-interest. Spokes resign at the slightest scandal. They've been removed for even minor hints of corruption. It's nothing to a spoke to let themselves be killed, if it protects everyone else. Our star wasn't bluffing when she told Esek, or whoever that is, that the wheel would surrender to save the rest of the Juveni. She would have done it. They all would. And a new wheel would take their place, and the rest of us would find a way to avenge them. We are as ready to die for them as they are to die for us." Jun considers this, a model of leadership and fealty so unfamiliar to her. She remembers Massar's horror when Niccolo was shot, realizes with fresh perspective how difficult it was for him not to turn back. "After what happened, you'll be fugitives, tens of thousands of you. How can your wheel possibly protect its people from the Kindom? They'll find you eventually." Massar smiles again, cunning and self-satisfied. "Don't worry about that." He pushes open a door and leads them into a new hallway, less populated than the previous. He speaks again, suddenly all business. "We can't leave the hospital. I'm sorry, and I can't tell you all the things you want to know. The man coming to see you, he won't be able to tell you everything either, but hopefully it'll be enough." Jun narrows her eyes, wondering which member of the wheel has been tapped to deal with her recalcitrance. "Okay," she mutters. "You know, there's something I've wanted to ask you. All this time, you've been saving up to rescue your family. Where were you planning to go? You didn't want to hide with us, so I assume hiding itself wasn't in your plans. Were you going to live in the open again?
Let your money protect you.
Jun gives him a cautious, sidelong look. I had my eye on one of the frontier stations, out past the boundaries of Cater. It's a 3-year trip. The Kindom never bothers them. Messar chuckles and Jun bristles. What?
Nothing. It's nothing.
Is that where we're headed? The frontier? My hood program can't still be shielding the whole fleet. I could barely make it fit long enough to get us through one jump gate.
He shrugs. We have our own kind of hood now.
Jun glares. That's bullshit.
Well, stop asking me questions I can't answer.
He tilts his head suddenly. He's getting some kind of calm. He nods.
All right, good. This way.
They round a corner into an open room. Maybe another waiting area for patients' families, though it's empty now. Jun raises an eyebrow at Messar, and he gives her a look that means, wait. But his expression is warm, not chastising. Sighing, she turns away from him, eyes immediately pulled toward one of the walls. There's a mural drawn on it, ancient and with faded colors. First confused, then amazed, she realizes that it's the first portrait of the 6 gods, but not a recreation. The original. She steps closer, taking in each of the gods in turn. A faded orange and yellow sun rises above the 6 figures, the god fire burning down on them. Their details, worn and roughened, still manage to convey something majestic. Jun was never much for the gods, never needed worship or god texts, never cared about the old riddle, who is the 6th god. Casting was always her god, Casting and her family and Lys. But even she is impressed by the sheer historical significance of what she's looking at. Her gaze gravitates to Sejevin, always with 5 eyes in a wheel shape, warm and smiling and secretive. What would it be like to work among the Jeveni? To immerse herself in the culture of this barren god, known for warmth and kindness. Was Niccolo serious, she calls over her shoulder, about offering me a job?
A lot of people died keeping you alive. He was serious.
That pricks her with guilt, and her eyes drift to Makala, fecund and lovely, her family's god, though they were never very religious. Esek's god, and Esek was far from righteous. Ricari said to Jun once, the gods are in our actions, and Niccolo said, our lives are ours to use. And Jun thinks about weary, regretful Chono, bound by her past mistakes and yet so clearly wanting to be good. It's a funny drawing, isn't it? Thinks Jun aloud, stepping back from the wall to observe it more holistically. She hears a door open behind her and knows that someone from the wheel must be here. She doesn't rush to turn around. Let them wait. A voice says,
Jun?
Something inside her locks tight, a kind of terror. For several moments she doesn't move. She hardly breathes. She tells herself, I don't know that voice. Then, at last, she turns around. There is a man standing in front of her, stocky and not much taller than she is, young and smiling tentatively, his eyes the color of dark wheat. Jun's heart lurches into her throat, as though it will break through her body, as though it will swell and expand and devour the room. It rises on wings of grief and love, of hope and fear. It puts her into their childhood bedroom, the 2 of them playing with a busted electrical board that Great Grog gave her to fix. Jun, at 9, says softly, Now careful, that bit'll shock you. But don't worry, I won't let you get hurt. The boy, the man, looks at her wonderingly. They look alike, more than they did as children. Her face is in his face, and Ricari's face is in both of them.
Jun,
he says again, a little hoarse, and he laughs, a little raw.
Don't you know me?
Jun swallows, trying to hold on to her heart. She says his name like it's a bet she's laying in a game of tiles, like it's her whole life and future and past gambled on this moment. Bene? Then with relief he laughs again, and his eyes are blurred with tears, or are those hers?
Yes,
he says in disbelief, in joy.
Yes!
And before she can blink, before she can wake up and lose it all again, He rushes her. And all of these does the god fire favor. To all of these do its child gods commit their praise. For there is no kingdom but for those who make the kingdom great. So let live the kinship that unites stranger to stranger. Let live the voice of justice in our midst. Let live the spirit of mercy in our hearts. Let live the one who fights corruption and protects the child in the dark. The Beatitudes, 1:9. God texts. Pre-trouble. Chapter 27, 1664. Year of the Crux. The risen wave. Somewhere. They don't see anyone or talk to anyone for 4 days. There was a period of forced unconsciousness after the Juveni took them into custody, and when they woke, they were in a cell, which could be on a ship or on a planet or on a station. But they know with a certainty that they are still aboard the risen wave. Meals appear at regular intervals, through a slot under the cell door. The food is generous, rich with the flavor profiles of Juveni cuisine. The breakfast meal always includes a traditional mint reed, a hand-length fibrous tube Lucas Alanye often lauded in his journals. The objects and customs of the Juveni fascinated Alanye, a condescending fascination that sometimes made Six walk away from his recordings exasperated. Discovering that they are descended of a Juveni woman has brought Six a vindictive comfort, allowing them to conceive of their lineage as branching from her rather than the insipid Alanye. He was not the genocider that the trouble takes him for, but he was an opportunist and a fool, and Six's disdain for him is tireless. And yet, like him, they enjoy the mint reed. They sit on their cot with their back braced against the wall. They watch the door and chew the reed. The silence, the solitude, the waiting are not difficult after so many months of endless activity. Esek was so much. Always the biggest personality in the room. Always the focus of everyone's ire and captivation. It was exhausting to be Esek. Not that they didn't relish it sometimes. A secret relish, a sensation of victory. Never more acute than when they were with Chono. When they could see and hear and talk with Chono as Esek had, rather than from an inconspicuous distance. They have heard nothing about her survival. They refuse any reality where she has died. When Juveni descended on the train car, everyone pointing guns at Six till they were flat on their stomach with hands behind their back, all they cared about was the group of medics, 2 squatting down beside Lise Cognier, 3 gathering around Chono. They watched Chono borne onto a stretcher and taken off the train car, as they themselves were being bound. And for a moment, their eyes and Chono's eyes locked, and Chono was alive. And then a dark shaft of unconsciousness cleaved them apart. There is no reality where Chono has died. On the 5th day, the door opens. 3 armed Juveni appear, wearing mountain gray uniforms with the mask of Sejevan appliqued on their chests. These are what the warriors who descended on Ketch Market were wearing as well. Apparently, the Juveni have a standing army. That's good. They'll need their own forces to protect them from the Kindom going forward. "Please come with us," says one of the soldiers. They expect to be shackled or at least escorted under drawn guns, but the Juveni do neither. Led by one, followed by the other 2, they enter a nondescript hallway, then a kind of garage where a small, roofless war cat waits for them. The soldiers drive them down what seems at first an interminable service tunnel. One of the Juveni lights a cigarette and offers them one, an unexpected courtesy that reminds them of old stories about prisoners getting one last cigarette before execution. They decline. Esek never smoked. "I hear you're called Six," says the soldier. Ah, so was it Jun Ironway or Chono who convinced the wheel who they are? They nod to the soldier, who drags on his cigarette. "Funny name. Do you know 6 means spider in Je?" The corner of their mouth twitches as they watch the road ahead of them. "Yes," When the war cat pulls over, the smoking soldier takes a last drag and then grinds out the cigarette in a little metal ashtray in the door. The mundanity of it, after so much, is momentarily fascinating. They absurdly want to ask for a cigarette just so they can stub it out in the square metal tin. But then the soldiers gesture them out of the vehicle, to a door in the service tunnel. A short flight of stairs later, and they are delivered into some kind of foyer, brightly lit and empty, but for one other person, a very young woman. "Thank you, friends," she says to the soldiers. To Six's surprise, the soldiers go back the way they came, leaving Six alone with the stranger. Except she isn't a stranger. Six knows exactly who she is. They look at each other for several moments before at last Effigen 10-crossed asks, "What would you like me to call you?" Six hesitates. The woman before them is 19, maybe 20. She's a foot shorter than Six at least. She's plump and pretty, with greenish hazel eyes, and it would be very easy to sneer at the idea of answering to such a young person. But Six knows they are not speaking to a girl. They're answering to the star of the wheel. At first, they can't answer at all. They examine her instead. Effigen is wearing a bright green robe with elaborate silver threadwork, her hair the color of rich, dark soil, intricately braided into a crown. There are rings on her fingers and studs in her ears, black as pitch and red-veined. It can't be real Jevite. Real Jevite would have paled by now, surely. "Perhaps your birth name," Effigen says. Six's nerves vibrate like the struck strings of a long-hidden instrument. They meet the girl's hawkish eyes, intelligent and watchful. For a split second, she reminds Six of a young Elysiana. But the star's stare, though assessing, lacks that bite of cruelty. At their silence, she asks, "Or Sa Alanye?" That name makes them want to growl. They answer, "Every name I have used has been a tool. I have never chosen a name because it mattered to me. You may call me whatever you wish to call me. All my names are the same to me." A low chuckle, belying her youth. "Cleric Chono said you would be mysterious." Six's chest tightens, but they keep their stare impassive. "I take it Cleric Chono has survived." "She has. Putting those suture bots in her chest saved her life, and our doctors were able to clean up most of the mess. She's still weak, but she'll pull through." A brief silence passes, Six keeping their expression flat, until Effigen 10-crossed suddenly smiles, eyes sparkling. "Have you got any idea how strange it is to look at you?" she asks. Her smile brightens. "Esek Nightfoot was a masterclass of overblown emotionality, and here you are wearing her face, but looking like you've never had a facial expression in your life. It is totally bizarre. Is this your natural inclination? To be expressionless?" Six considers. At school, they were never accused of expressionlessness. They were known for a constant scowl, for an air of disdain and distrust that once got them taken aside by the sparring teacher. "I know all the entertainments depict cloaks on as these constantly grimacing behemoths," she'd said, "but if you want to be a real cloak, you'll have to learn to control that face of yours." Later, when Six fled Principes in the cargo deck of a pirate ship, they realized their teacher was correct. They were too conspicuous. If they wanted to survive, they'd need a lot more skills than fighting prowess. They'd need resilience, control, brutality, but also dispassion. They decided to mimic Chono. Chono had come to school already halfway to perfecting her emotionless facade, a survival instinct from a home she never talked about. Six determined to be like her and wear composure like a veil. It had probably saved their life, this decision, this first of many masks. Realizing the star is still watching them, Six finally answers, "It took 8 facial surgeries to make me look like this. After each surgery, I had to exercise my facial muscles to prevent atrophy. Each time, I had to learn a new face. When I became Esek, No moment passed that I was not exercising my face like a marionette. After all that, there is some relief to having no expression. Effigen nods sagely, though she's still looking at them in a disquietingly maternal way. You've done a lot to yourself. Six doesn't respond. After we arrested you, we injected you with a sedative. I apologize. We believed we were dealing with Esek Nightfoot and couldn't risk leaving her conscious. While you were under, my casters extracted several encrypted data packets from your neural link. Or, to put it more honestly, Jun Ironway extracted them. Six isn't sure what happens to their face, but whatever it is, it makes Effigen smile kindly. Again, forgive our violations. I believe Saw Ironway did it to prove you were not Esek Nightfoot. As you can imagine, we had our doubts. But the contents of those data packets answered a lot of questions we didn't even know to ask. Still, Six is silent. They have been trying to get into the same room as the Wheel ever since they killed Esek in the Verdant Tower. Even for them, a master of infiltration, of subterfuge, of finding things and people, the task proved impossible. So good at hiding, the Wheel. How else could they have survived? In the end, Jun Ironway and Missar Hawks were the best lead they found. They tracked those two space urchins across the Treble, and now, here they are. In the presence of Effigen Ten Crossed, the thing they've been aiming toward for years. Yet suddenly, they are as shy as a kin school student on day one, voiceless under the force of the history that's brought them here. The star is not voiceless. She twirls her fingers, a youthful gesture, and bumps her wrist, tossing an array of images into the air, satellites of revelation orbiting their heads. It's an eclectic collection, shipping manifests, union leader profiles, correspondences, bank accounts, legal records, and, most importantly, a notarized will. It's taken us 3 days to come to any kind of theory of what you've done. Effigen looks up at the holograms like a child watching clouds drift. We thought at first you had simply consolidated the entire sevite industry under Esek Nightfoot. Under yourself, I should say. Given what cleric Chono has told us about your long-standing rivalry with Saw Nightfoot, stealing the sevite industry from her makes sense as a kind of revenge. But that's not what you've done, is it? Or it's not all you've done. Six says nothing. Six has waited over a decade for this moment, but suddenly they are exhausted. It's as if they haven't slept in years, and all the weight of what they've done instead of sleeping now lands with slow, crushing pressure. When they do speak, they whisper. It is my gift. Effigen cocks her head, quizzical as a bird, waiting for them to explain. Their throat feels dry. They swallow. It began as revenge, but revenge was not enough. A shiver runs down their spine, which is the memory of Esek's whisper in their ear, a coax and a curse. But Esek was so small. She amounted to so little in the end. I do not need to tell you. The Jevite industry was more than anyone could ever avenge. Hundreds of years of theft, of murder and rape and kidnapping, and the destruction of your moon, of my ancestors' moon. Revenge could never be enough. I wanted more than revenge. I wanted recompense. That is what I have done, Saw-Crossed. The entire Sevite trade is mine now, and I am giving it to you. The star looks at them for a long time, and if Six expected any particular reaction, they don't know whether this stare is it or not. Everything feels fuzzy and muted now, a world behind sheets of water, and they are so sleepy. Now that it's done, they would give anything for that cot in the cell. They would give anything to crawl into a quiet, dark place and never emerge. Effigen says, That is quite a gift. I see that you distributed the various shares to myself and the other members of the Wheel. My kin and I are fugitives now. Certainly the Kindom will invalidate any transfer of assets. Surely they will invalidate you, the traitor Esek Nightfoot?
Six sighs and nods. The Cloak's Son and Clerisy, yes, they will try to. But Kindom law is complex and hypocritical, and easily manipulated if you have the right people in your pocket.
You mean the secretaries?
I mean the secretaries. Give your scholars more time to review the data packet. You will find I have thought of everything. It will be difficult, of course. There will be legal challenges, and all of it hinges on Esek's death, Six's death, which they will have to fake before the transfer officially takes place. But they have used their clever allies to enact a beautiful and vicious revenge, one that will empower the sevite unions and force the first families to ingratiate themselves to the wheel. Even the transformation of their own body does not compete with the complexity and genius of what they have done with the sevite trade. The star looks at them thoughtfully, nodding. After a moment, she says,
We found evidence in your packet. Proof of the Kindom's responsibility for the Juveni genocide. And Cleric Chono says that while she was Esek's novitiate, you collected records that showed the link between the genocide and the Nightfoots. She says you sent them to her as part of some elaborate game with Esek. Why did you do all of that?
It surprises Six that they aren't too tired for the sudden warm sensation of amusement. My purpose was fourfold there. First, I collected the evidence to make sure nothing threatened Nightfoot power before I could find a way to steal it. Second, I wished to retain evidence as my own insurance. Third, it kept Esek off the scent of my real purpose. Fourth, they pause, and they very nearly laugh, but it would probably sound hysterical, and they do not want to be hysterical in front of the star. Effigen, however, is on to them.
You did it to fuck with her.
They look at each other. The girl's eyes are sparkling. One could almost think she doesn't carry the weight of her people's government on her back, a weight only increased now the river is dead. Will they have elected Nicholas and Reeves' replacement yet? They will need a strong wheel for the work ahead. If the light in this girl's eyes means anything, then she will be equal to the task. And that, Six thinks, that will make it worthwhile. Yes. What else can they tell themselves but that it will make everything worthwhile?
Did you know we searched for you?
The girl's voice, the gentleness of it, jolts Six out of their thoughts as rudely as if they'd been struck. They stare at her. It's not only her voice that's gentle. Her sparkling eyes have softened. There's a tenderness in her look that wasn't there before. It makes Six flinch inside. What? Their voice is flat. The star repeats.
We searched for you. In the past 30 years, we've searched for all the lost children of our ancestors. People like Massar have given up their names and their Juveni tattoos to do it. Your great-great-grandmother was Dre Sunbreet, Alania's lover. She managed to get off of Jeve in the first hours of the bombings, but succumbed to her injuries later. Her children had been safe on Cater for several months, and one of their descendants, your father, settled on Teros. When we first searched for you, we learned that he had died and that a secretary took you for a ward. I assume you are the one who killed that secretary 20 years ago? We tracked you as far as the kin school on Principes, but by then, you had disappeared.
Six looks at her stonily, which seems not to disturb the girl at all. Her expression is earnest.
We searched for you. We didn't forget you. But you've been so determined not to be found.
I was concerned with other matters.
Yes, we see that now.
There's the faintest hint of recrimination in it. All the years of trying to emulate Chono can't stop Six's jaw from tightening, can't tamp the anger that rises up like a sob. And what could you have possibly given? If you had found me, they demand.
Purpose, for one. You have gifts, insights. We could have used them. But more than that, we simply wanted you to come home. We could have given you a home.
Six very nearly steps back from her, as if from a threat. Effigen sighs.
She twists her wrist, and the satellites of data vanish from the air.
I want to show you something. Will you come? They're waiting for us.
Six doesn't have a chance to ask who they are before Effigen has turned away. Six follows her to the set of double doors on the opposite side of the foyer, but no sooner have they stepped through than they come to a startled halt. The room is vast and domed. Its whole breadth projects a limitless vista of stars. It's a planetarium, like the one Six visited as a child on Taros, with Da, before the adopting secretary, before the kin school, before Esek. They stand still and gaze up as if they've never been on a spacecraft before, or a station even. It is so big that for a shocking moment they feel small. Small, as if they have forgotten they ever were. Small, like a pinprick. How immutable it is. How spectacular they feel to be small in the face of something so wondrous and quiet and unending.
This way, Saw Six, says Effigen coaxingly.
But when Six looks the way she is going, their throat closes. The room hosts a large table, ringed with chairs where many occupants sit staring at them, and one voice says, Six. She's 20 feet away and half shadowed by the dark of the planetarium. Six would know her anywhere. Six would feel her presence in a pitch-black room. She looks at them solemnly, her near death hanging over her like a shroud, face aged and weary. Six had not planned to tell her who they were. Six had always imagined that Chono would attack them if she learned the truth. But that was hardly possible with her bleeding to death in that train car. Chono's eyes snap away, and it's like the severance of a tight and vibrating thread. Released, Six blinks around at the rest of the table and approaches cautiously. There are other members of the wheel in their green robes. A handsome middle-aged man, the tree, a silver-haired woman with cool eyes, the stone, and a person about Six's age, fat and elegant, the Gale. No Niccolo, no New River. They all watch Six's approach with varying degrees of suspicion, and when Six sits down in a chair across from theirs, it reminds them of exams back at school, a somber jury waiting to see what they'd make of themselves. There are others at the table beside Chono. The pirate, Messar Hawks, not really a pirate. The former Cloakson Lys Conye, now sporting a new arm. When Six discovers Jun Ironway to their right, it actually startles them. Sunstep. That scrawny little kid they found in the Rincala safe house, built like a reed and eyes full of fire that was much more than the fever raging through them. Six hadn't expected her to survive. Certainly not to become this caster genius, this con artist turned world breaker. Of all the absurdities. I wasn't sure they let you live, Jun says with feigned brightness. Six looks at her flatly. You hacked my neural link. An indolent shrug, but there's a challenge in it. The caster is obviously curious about them, but also wary. Chono wears no expression at all, though it is not her usual placid mask. There's a rigidity, a forcedness. She is pretending. Were we right? Asks the stone, her voice as rough as waves on the sand. She's looking at Effigen. Effigen nods, and the stone looks at Six, some of her guardedness fading, though she does not appear welcoming. The Gale, eyes a deep and watchful brown, says, Then I suppose we can begin. Effigen smiles. Yes, let's. Jun's body shifts forward. Begin what? The star looks amused.
Messar tells me you have not stopped harassing him for information about where you are. We thought it best to make the situation clear to all of you. At the same time, I'm sorry if we have tried your patience.
The caster sniffs. I threw a hood over every ship in your fleet and over this generation ship besides, and I hacked us transport through a jump gate, even though you refused to tell me the coordinates we were going to. I think I've earned a little impatience. Messar groans. There'll be no living with her. Jun answers pleasantly. Fuck off, and demands of Effigen. Where in the gods damned black are we? The members of the wheel look at one another, all eyes finally resolving on Ephigen, who sits back in her chair again and manipulates the air with twisting fingers. Her cast grabs the overhead vista and turns it like a dial. 6 winces from the disorientation of the stars above blurring, the room itself seeming to flow toward new coordinates. Then, all at once, something massive and unexpected floods into view. A planet. An ice-blue, cloud-strewn, moon-crowned wonder of a planet. 6 is too amazed to take note of anyone else's reaction. They have a distant sense of someone, probably Jun, cursing under her breath, but they don't look at her. They don't even look at Chono, because how could they possibly? How in this moment could they do anything but stare in open wonder and something akin to fear at the gorgeous curve of a pale planet blotting out the stars? They have visited every planet in the Treble, every moon, every space station. They have stood upon the vast green savannas of Makes, tracked the purple mountains of Cater, climbed down into the red clay gulches of Taros and the jungle ravines of Bremen, and they have floated on their back in the planet-blanketing ocean of Quietus. And in all these places, they have looked up into night skies pocked with celestial bodies, but none of those were this bright white orb of a planet now hanging before them. Ephigen says, "We call it Capamame, named for a god. The dear friend," thinks 6. Little respected by his more powerful siblings, but beloved of Sejevin and the Quietans. Chono used to tell his story at school. 6 dares a glance in her direction, and she is gazing up at the planet with furrowed brow, lips parted. Ephigen explains, "Before our ancestors colonized the Treble, they considered a number of star systems and a number of planets. Most were rejected because of either distance or habitability. Capamame failed on both counts. Too far away. Too difficult to colonize." As she continues, an array of planetary data fills the air, which she narrates like a lecturer in a schoolroom. "It's comparable in size to Makes, but has 4 moons, as you can see. It's composed of 4 continents, which are altogether equal in land mass to the planet's ocean. There is no terrestrial life beyond insects and microorganisms. There is ocean life, though we are not sure of its extent. Its warmest recorded temperature is only 22 degrees, but if you stay within range of its equatorial line and are properly equipped, you can survive year-round, which is what we intend to do." 6, whose head has been tilted back like an awestruck child's, now snaps their chin down and looks sharply at Ephigen. The young star is already looking at them, and 6 is convinced this whole speech was directed at them. Jun Ironway asks, "Do you mean we're orbiting this planet right now?" "What, do you think we're just showing you pretty pictures?" retorts Massar. Fuck you. That report says this planet is 40 light years away from the Treble. How the hell did we get here?" "By jump gate," he says. "You can't just jump to another planet. You need a gate to jump to. You need—" Suddenly the vista shifts again, rotating them around the ice planet until they've circled it entire, and there, balanced on the curving horizon, backlit by a distant throbbing sun, there it hangs, the mercurial sphere of a jump gate. They sweep toward it, borne closer and closer, as if they are about to enter its shimmering mouth. To 6's amazement, the very fact of the jump gate isn't even the most surprising thing. It's that it looks nothing like any gate they've seen before. None of the trappings of Kindom construction. None of the orbiting security stations. The gate is small. It is Spartan. While Kindom gates are gargantuan cages that both contain and constrain the interdimensional sphere, this gate is slim and elegant and invisible in places. A delicate silver latticework. A miracle of engineering. After a few moments of stunned silence, Lise Cognier asks, "How long did it take you to reach the planet by standard travel?" Ephigen 10-crossed replies, 63 years. We began the journey in 1588, a year before our moon was destroyed. Lucas Alanye, a glance at 6, and the Kindom scrutiny he brought with him forced us to speed up our timetable. The crew arrived in Capamame space in 1651. Lise nods. Then, bowing her head respectfully, she addresses all four of the spokes. Forgive me, son, but I studied the Jeveni when I was a student at my kin school. Even allowing that your people hid a valuable Jevite seam for centuries, you were never wealthy after the sevite trade devastated your moon. The resources needed to build a gate, to say nothing of purchasing a ship that could manage a journey that long. How did you do it? Ephigen's laugh surprises them, as do the responding smiles of the other members of the wheel. Sharp, self-satisfied smiles. The tree lays long-fingered hands on the table, tapping them thoughtfully. How shall we say it? You and Jun Ironway are not the only con artists in the history of the Black Ocean. Jun's eyebrows hike upward, excitement in her eyes. Are you saying you're thieves? Oh gods, please tell me you're thieves. I knew Niccolo looked like a pickpocket. The stone huffs irritably, though there is a quirk of humor at the corner of her mouth. We are not thieves, saw Ironway. After the Jevite trade failed and the Kindom abandoned us, we did what so many in the Trouble do. We sent our best minds out to make their fortunes. They hid their tattoos, hid their origins, and became collectors. A couple of centuries and strict frugality were enough to amass a fortune. Our generations of poverty were in the service of a higher goal. Six thinks of Luco Solanier, exasperated by the Jeveni's Spartan lifestyles, how they refused to use the hydroponics and casting equipment he brought them. Now, Six realizes, they took that equipment and reserved it for their eventual flight. Far-thinking and clever. Meanwhile, says the Gale, we mined our Jevite seam for enough raw material to power our ship and a jump gate. That was the financial side, continues Ephigen, but it's taken more than money. Over 2,000 Jeveni gave up everything in order to spend their lives crossing the Black Ocean. They committed to make new families in transit, to have children, to raise their children and their grandchildren for one purpose: reach Capamame, build a gate, and make a way for the rest of us. They did all of this, knowing their ship might fail en route, or they might reach Capamame and find it truly uninhabitable. It's only these past 10 years that we've seen true cause for hope. A year since we successfully tested the gate. The spokes of the wheel are the only ones who know its coordinates, which means no one can follow us here, not even if they know the gate exists. This is why Niccolo let himself be killed rather than captured. This is our deliverance from the Kindom. This is something we will build for ourselves. At that, Jun Ironway leans forward, her brow furrowed. Are you saying that all the Jeveni, the assimilationists and the collectives, have committed to this together? A dry smile from Ephigen. No people could boast a unanimous mission. Only a fraction of our population knew about this plan. We had intended to use Remembrance Day to share Capamame with our entire population, so that each Jeveni could choose for themselves. Instead, circumstances have forced us to bring everyone here, and we are still working through the ramifications of that. But we are committed to our secession from the Kindom. There is no other course for us. She pauses, thoughtful. It is a great irony. The Kindom has long suspected us of plotting treason. They even believed that we allied with Esek Nightfoot to stage a revolt. In a way, they were right, but not the way they thought. Six feels the following silence like a weight on their chest, before, slowly, Ephigen looks at them again. Her expression is unspeakably kind, but her words shatter their life. I'm afraid we don't want the sevite industry, saw Six. You see, it's of no use to us. Running the sevite factories gave many of our people a way to live, but a difficult way, an unjust way, as corrupt at times as when we mined Jeve under the Kindom's fist. To take control of such an industry, to wield it and maintain it, that would dishonor our God. I hope you can understand this. I hope you can make peace with it. Six stares at her. What can they say after all that wouldn't be meaningless sounds masquerading as words? It's all beyond language for them. Years. Years and years and years. A whole life passed in dark corners and hidden alleys and empty rooms. A whole life of sweat-soaked late-night exertions, till there wasn't a weapon in the treble they hadn't mastered, nor an inch of their skin they hadn't bruised or torn or calloused from overwork, learning to treat their own wounds in isolation, learning to speak new languages with no one to speak to, learning new voices, training the six out of their vocal cords and replacing it with Esek's cruel drawl, replacing their face and their hands and their skin with Esek so someday they could take and then give away everything. And what would Esek say to all of this now? Esek would laugh. Yes, Six can see her as she was in her final moments, laughing and gurgling, with their ear between her teeth. Her last blow, all mockery and defiance. Her last vow to haunt them, even into their death. What is it you want from us? Chono's voice splits the silence, more tired than Six remembers. Six looks at her. She is barely recovered, yet she sits there with her typical proud posture and regards Ephigen steadily. The star has been looking at Six all this time. Now she takes in the rest of the room. A fair question. What we want is to give all our people a choice. Stay with us, or return to the treble. You six are a Jeveni, and so you're entitled to that same choice. As for you three, she looks at Chono, Jun, and Lise, your choice is more complicated. Though we have made our plans as Jeveni, we are not the supremacists the treble takes us for. Building a new world is a difficult enterprise. We need all kinds. There are quite a few non-Jeveni among us, including the last of the Ironways. Six glances quickly at Jun and sees a new expression on her face, a kind of pure joy that she appears to be trying to control, like someone embarrassed to be caught skipping. Six themselves is baffled. How did you find them? They demand, feeling a prick to their professional ego. I hid them, expertly. Ephigen smiles. We found them because of you. As I told you, we've been looking for you for years with very few leads. Jun's aunt married a Jeveni engineer on the farm station. She told him about the stranger who rescued her family. The engineer shared the lead with our collectors. It didn't ultimately help us find you six, but the family left an impression. She is practically beaming when she looks at Jun. Your oldest cousin, Bene. He has your ferocity, I think. We could not bear to leave him behind. Jun beams with pride, tears in her eyes. Lise Cognier puts a hand on the back of her neck, intimate and comforting, and Six looks away. They catch Chono's eyes just for a moment, but Chono breaks contact almost instantly. Ephigen continues. We would never force you to remain with us on this planet, Jun, and it's not my intention to dangle your family like a carrot. Everyone must make their own choice. What we're asking of you is a lot. Life on Kapamame will be difficult. If it's not the life you want, the jump gate is fully operational. We can send you back to the treble with all our gratitude for the service you have already rendered. Sa Cognier, of course, the same offer extends. I go where Jun goes, Cognier interrupts. Ephigen 10 crossed, nods in respectful understanding. Then she looks at Jun again. Jun is wiping her eyes. Six thinks about the day they met, the vehemence of this girl's vow, that she would bring her family together again. Listening to her, they'd felt an unwelcome glimmer of affinity, knowing how much they would give to undo the deaths of their own family. And Jun Ironway's determination, her grit and recklessness, these were things Six carried in their own heart as well, that gave both of them the power to survive. The young caster clears her throat, striving for composure. I have to discuss it with my entire family, but if they want to stay, I'm staying. Even as she says it, Jun's eyes widen a little. She lets out a shuddering breath. Six knows what she is thinking. She is thinking that she has come to the end of a seemingly interminable fight. She is thinking, hard life or not, I could finally rest. And Six thinks with a flutter in their stomach, so can I. They can let their life of hunting and scheming go. They can give themselves to this other world, this Kapamame, beyond the grip of the hands. Surely Esek Nightfoot's reach won't extend so far. Surely, here, Six could escape the haunting she promised them and find peace in the icy climes of a new world. All the work they've done, imagined, fought for. Effigen Ten-Crossed wrecked it with a word, but now she's giving Six something new, and Six's heart blooms with a feeling so foreign it almost frightens them. Hope.
And then there is you, Cleric Chono.
Instantly, the descending cloud of calm shreds apart. Six's dreaming heart leaps up and lodges in their throat as they turn sharp eyes back on Effigen. She and the other members of the wheel are looking at Chono. Chono gazes back, tired and pale. Six feels pale too, because there will be no peace on Capamame if the Jeveni send Chono away. Effigen says,
I admit there is debate over what to do with you. Already we have reports from the Trouble. Your kin say you are dead. Would it surprise you to know that quite a lot of people are talking about you on the casting net? They paint a picture that, I confess, we weren't expecting. Talk of the good works you've done, of the gaping hole you leave behind. The people on Pipishap have declared a month of mourning, and they burn lanterns to your memory. It's all enough to make us think you are something different from the ones with whom you've comported, so—
Chono interrupts, but that comportment alone is a heavy mark against me. Tension alights at the table, like electricity sparking from one end to the other. Six, who has learned to scan a room for threats and refuge, scans it now, searches the faces of the wheel and Jun Ironway and Lise Cognier for some hint of compassion. Lisa's expression is unreadable. Jun looks conflicted and cautious. Overall, it is not a promising scene. Effigen nods.
That's true. Whatever your works, you're a hand, which is why some people have gone so far as to say we should execute you. There's no need to panic, saw Six.
A quick glance at them, both reassuring and stern, but Six's heart doesn't stop pounding.
We've put that idea aside. The more common opinion is we should simply send Cleric Chono back to the Trouble. Let her have a resurrection. Of course, if you do go back, your kin may reframe you as a traitor. I predict they'll torture you for information about our gate coordinates, which you won't be able to give. It's very possible they will execute you, which is why another faction of the Jeveni think we should show you the mercy of our God and let you remain here, where you'll be safe. The wheel itself has heard all these arguments. Before we make a decision, we thought we should give you a chance to state your case.
Chono must feel Six looking at her, must feel the imploring intensity of their stare, but she doesn't react to it. She simply straightens her shoulders, looking first at Effigen Ten-Crossed, and then from each of the spokes to the next. Six thinks of the first time they heard Chono recite prayers, the power and poetry of her voice, the orator in her. If she marshals those skills now, if she shows these people the beauty of her character and the humility of heart, all in that liquid, God's blessed voice, then they will not send her back to the clutches of the Kindom. Chono says, I have no case to make, Sa. With your permission, I intend to return to the Trouble right away. The surprise in the room has a whip-crack intensity, and Six's chest is compressing so tight they can hardly breathe. Their mouth opens, their lips move, preparing to say something, voice some protest, find some way to stop this. But then, Chono looks at them. And you're coming with me. They remember Esek Nightfoot stumbling back, impaled on the blood letter Six flung at her. This moment feels like that. Impaled and carrying the same brutal intimacy. There is no one else sitting at the table anymore. There is only Chono with her storm cloud eyes. It is the first time since the train that she has really, truly looked at them, and Six holds that stare like a climbing rope, like it is the only thing preventing them from plummeting to their death. For once, Chono does not conceal her emotions. Her eyes search Six's face, a scouring look, a look full of conflict and pain as she tries to reconcile the face of her mentor with the person of her schoolkin. and Six cannot help her. All Six can do is try to fathom her terrible, incomprehensible words. Softly, they ask, "Why would we do that?" Chono has been sitting with her hands on her lap, but now she rests one of them on the table. She holds it there, tensely, as if she's getting ready to strike something. She may seem perfectly steady to the others at the table, but Six has spent a lifetime studying Chono as closely as they studied Esek. Chono is not calm. "What will happen to the sevite trade?" she asks. Six hesitates, surprised. Then irritation sets in. "I expect the families in the Kindom will kill one another over it." "That's right," Chono says. Her stare holds censure now. The righteous cleric condemning evil. Six begins to understand, and a lance of rage goes through them. "It is not my responsibility." Chono is unyielding, unmoved. "You wrote to me for years. I've read everything you had locked away in your neural link. I know what you've done. To make sure Esek would inherit the matriarchy. To make sure the trade would belong to her, and all the people indebted to the trade would be indebted to her. You did everything to give Esek that power, and you succeeded. Esek has everything." "Esek is dead," snaps Six. "You are Esek now." Six is on their feet in an instant, shouting in fury and terror. "I am not!" Chono never wavers. Her hand is still resting on the tabletop, an uncompleted gesture, and her eyes are huge and full of grief, but also demand and accusation. "You chose her, Six." "I did not." "We both did." Their breaths come raggedly. Chono holds them pinned, and Esek's ghost flits through the room. Chono says, "We both chose her. We chose to follow her, to learn from her. We became echoes of her, whether we wanted to or not, whether we were as bad as her or not. Now she's dead, but we aren't. We carry the responsibility for what we chose. We must make amends." This is unbearable. This is a sickness if Chono believes it. Six grinds out with all the passion of a lifelong hatred. "Esek was a poison. The Nightfoots are a poison. What would you have me do? Redeem them?" "What would you have had the Juveni do? If they accepted the sevite industry?" Six closes their mouth, stunned. In all the years of bringing their plan to fruition, this was a question they did not entertain. It was not for them to entertain, was it? To give a gift is to let it go, to release one's ownership of it. The wheel, whom they had known only from a distance, would make something beautiful from their gift, they were certain. Something to shame all the centuries of Kindom tyranny and Nightfoot greed. But Six had never planned to be a part of it. Chono, they think, can read all of this on their face, and for the first time since they have reunited in this room, her look shifts to something gentle. The change is more than Six can bear, and Six stands back from the table, as if this will give them the leverage they need when it all comes to violence. But it doesn't come to violence. Quiet Chono looks at them gently, and it is the most terrible, excruciating, exquisite thing. "It will have to be us now," she tells them. "There is no absolution otherwise. And I want to be absolved." A desperate edge enters her voice. Her eyes are wet. "Don't you? You'll spend your life having to convince everyone you're me. I'm going to fucking haunt you, Six, I swear it. I'll haunt you into the ground." But what if Chono is there too, when Esek comes haunting? Could any ghost pass through the bulwark that is Chono? Esek is a phantom. She is ashes in the wreckage of the verdant tower, and Chono is a cleric who makes the Beatitudes seem possible. "Saw Six." The new voice cracks their awareness like a gunshot. Startled, blinking, they discover the room is full of people after all, and one of them is Ephigen. Six stares at the girl, the star of her people, who says, "Not all the Juveni attended Remembrance Day, and not all will choose to stay on Capamame. And more than Jeveni have suffered because of the Kindom and the sevite trade. My people and I do not want the gift you've offered us. But I can't help thinking about the ones we're leaving behind. To stay and fight for them. That would be an extraordinary gift, too. You must do something extraordinary. All around them there are eyes, expectant and curious and wary. Somewhere in the room is Esek, too, prowling. It is not what they wanted. It is not what they planned. Lise Conye says in her quiet, commanding voice, the Kindom will seize the trade. There will be no check on their power. You and I know the Kindom saw. Can you bear for it to happen like that? Six blinks rapidly. They know so little of her, only that she escaped, and Six wants to escape. They want to escape, but not without Chono. Six, Chono whispers, beseeching. Six faces her again. For years they sent Chono letters, not always knowing why, but wanting, needing to keep the thread between them taut, to send vibrations across it that would ensure Chono never forgot her kinschool friend. For years they imagined a day when they stood before Chono again, when they looked into her eyes that have always reminded them of Esek's cruel game, her life-consuming offer. Now, suddenly, Six knows Chono's eyes will remind them of Kapamame hereafter. Kapamame and promise and choice. They look at their old friend, their only friend, under the stars of the planetarium. They open their mouth and choose. This has been a Hachette audio production of These Burning Stars, Book 1 of the Kindom Trilogy. Written by Bethany Jacobs. Read by Natalie Naudis. Produced by Janae Harvey. Post-production by Christian Eit. These Burning Stars, Book 1 of the Kindom Trilogy, is also available in print and as an ebook from Orbit, a division of Hachette Book Group. For more Hachette audio productions, visit us at hachetteaudio.com. Thank you for listening. Text copyright 2023 by Bethany Jacobs. Audio production copyright 2023 Hachette Audio. All rights reserved. Hachette Book Group supports the right to free expression and the value of copyright. The purpose of copyright is to encourage writers and artists to produce the creative works that enrich our culture. The duplicating, uploading, and distribution of this audiobook without permission is a theft of the author's intellectual property. If you would like permission to use material from the audiobook, other than for review purposes, please contact permissions@hbgusa.com. Thank you for your support of the author's rights. This audiobook is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental.